what did you expect when you got on the ground to Puerto Rico?
Well, I've been talking with Puerto Rican friends for a long time actually about coming and delving into what I call the shock doctrine as it relates to Puerto Rico. We've actually, I've been looking at this for a decade because this doesn't begin with Hurricane Maria. It's a much older story, and what I mean by the shock doctrine is, as you say, the way in which large-scale crises, times when things are bad enough that elites are able to kind of declare a state of exception or a state of emergency and say, okay, because this terrible thing has happened, and that terrible thing could be any number of major large-scale crises. It could be a terrorist attack, it could be a debilitating economic crisis, it could be a huge natural disaster. We've seen this strategy used in all of those contexts, saying, okay, things are so bad now that we have to kind of suspend democracy, have this state of emergency, state of exception, and really radically restructure society in a huge hurry, taking advantage of people's fear, their sense of disorientation, and also that when there is any kind of large-scale crisis, people are necessarily focused on the daily emergency of life, right? So this was happening in Puerto Rico in the context of a debilitating economic crisis. Puerto Rico's economy has been in big trouble for a long time, but when things really started getting worse around the debt was a year before the global economic crisis. Well, actually 2 years before. It started in 2006. Since then, we've been seeing various strategies to use the debt crisis in Puerto Rico. There's more than $70 billion in debt now, to say, okay, we're going to privatize huge swaths of the state, deregulate, create this kind of investor club med, get rid of taxes, regulations, do anything to attract multimillionaires and billionaires, to create this tax haven, really contract the public sphere, and so on. So that was happening before Hurricane Maria. The twist is that in the months before the storm hit, Puerto Ricans were at a peak of resistance. And this is something that often gets forgotten, right? That in May 1st, before this is just a few months before Hurricane Maria hit, there were 100,000 people in the streets in Puerto Rico, the second largest mass mobilization in Puerto Rico's history, saying no to austerity, demanding the resignation of the governor, saying that the debt that was being used to extract all of these so-called reforms was illegitimate, that they wanted an audit of the debt because much of it was illegal. Students at University of Puerto Rico staged a historic 72-day strike because of a proposal to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from the budget of University of Puerto Rico, essentially half of their budget they wanted to cut. So the Puerto Ricans were mobilized, and in the tens of thousands were saying we want to audit the debt. And so the project of restructuring Puerto Rico, of privatizing Puerto Rico, of selling it off, was kind of at a standstill. And then Maria hit, right? And so all the people who were organizing this movement had their lives shattered. And what is happening now is the same people with the same plans, including the Fiscal Control Board, which is a classic example of what I call the shock doctrine, using the debt to do away with the minimal democracy that Puerto Ricans have. And I say minimal because this is a colony where people have to live under laws that they cannot vote for because they don't have a representative in Congress. They can't vote for the president. But they do have a governor that supposedly has control over their economics, and he was supplanted, although he works closely with the Fiscal Control Board, who was in charge of their economics, similar to these emergency managers that you have seen imposed in places like Flint, Detroit, with disastrous impacts.